Blessed to be part of your day. Kevin Miller in the morning here on KIDO Talk Radio. Phone numbers 580-5436, 580-KIDO.
I would like to begin tonight's proceeding differently than perhaps any other event of such magnitude. On behalf of our nation, I want to apologize to Brett and the entire Kavanaugh family for the terrible pain and suffering you have been forced to endure. Those who step forward to serve our country deserve a fair and dignified evaluation, not a campaign of political and personal destruction based on lies and deception.
There we have it. With us now to comment, our great friend Phil Kerpen from American Commitment. Phil, good morning.
Hey, Kevin, how are you?
Not bad indeed. So justice has prevailed, but you know, we go back to Clarence Thomas, we go back to Judge Bork, and I guess this is the 2018 version of the high-tech lynching.
Yeah, my wife and I were both sort of physically ill over this for the last couple of weeks, just the disgusting over-the-top smears and dishonesty from the media and the Democrats. And it was great to see enough Republicans have enough backbone to prevail. But it really doesn't make the queasy feeling go away, because this was so close, and they were so adamant with saying things that were obviously untrue, that it really does, you can't help but be frightened that, half the country seems to think this is an acceptable way to conduct a confirmation.
And not only that, but just the mob-type mentality, the mob-type violence in the name of stopping alleged sexual violence. There doesn't seem to be a logical connection here when you hear the reports, see the reports of these folks shouting down people that have a constitutional right to disagree with them.
Well, there's this very strange sort of sense of, collective guilt and collective punishment that, even though there was zero evidence that Brett Kavanaugh ever did anything wrong, yet all these people saying, well, I was sexually assaulted, therefore he should be punished even though he had nothing to do with it, just because, someone should be punished. And that's a very unjust way to look at the world, and yet that seemed to be kind of a prevailing view on the left was, because these things do occur, even though there's zero evidence that this particular person did it, he ought to be punished. And that's pretty scary.
Not only that, but the presumption of guilt as opposed to the presumption of innocence.
Yeah, they really turned our whole system upside down. You actually had columnists, expressly arguing, he has to prove he's innocent. Well, how do you prove you're innocent when an accusation is made, sometime in the decade of the 1980s? I don't know the location, and I'm not quite sure who was there, but this guy, I'm 100% sure it was him. Well, how do you respond to that?
Right. How do you? And again, you have people. I don't know if Phil, what would you call it though? That recite the talking points and genuinely believe that not only Brett Kavanaugh but everybody is all is guilty till proven innocent. And even then, they're still guilty because they're men.
It's very strange. I tend to think that the Democratic politicians themselves didn't believe any of this. They just cynically deployed it for political reasons and to try to win this confirmation fight. Because they're too smart to actually believe this stuff with no evidence. And I think a lot of them were probably involved in cooking up the smears. So, of course, they knew they weren't true because they were involved in creating them. But I've really been struck by how many sort of rank-and-file Democratic voters just accepted it, just, uncritically said, okay, yeah, no, he's a sex criminal. I mean, when Michael Avenatti came out and said that he was running drugs and was planning 10-plus gang rape parties at the age of 15, I thought everyone in America would immediately scoff at that and reject it and say that's ridiculous and absurd. But instead, Feinstein and Schumer referenced it repeatedly into the record, and you saw a lot of liberals pick it up as if that was a perfectly valid accusation that needed to be dealt with. So there really didn't seem to be any limiting factor in terms of what was too ridiculous to even consider in this. And it really did become pretty grotesque circus. And, if Republicans had caved to that and allowed it to succeed, it would have really been psychologically devastating, I think, for everyone in the country who believes in innocent unless proven guilty, who believes in doing an honest above-board confirmation process. So in a sense, I was very relieved that it didn't prevail, but I'm still very uneasy with how close they came and with how many people bought into it, because it still says something pretty bad about where a lot of people are in this country right now.
Well, you just see the misguided passion in their eyes. And yesterday's Columbus Day, and instead of talking about the courage of Christopher Columbus, we hear how bad of a guy he is. And these people have been formulated under America is bad. People are bad, men are bad, and we're seeing the fruits of this in the hearing against Kavanaugh. And again, Phil, you're a historian. You go back to the Founding Fathers. They had some brutal fights, not only openly but in newspapers. But there was always critical thinking that seems to be lacking today, especially on the left.
Yeah, I really do think this was a new historic low. And frankly, there are only a couple of reasons. I think there are basically two reasons that Kavanaugh was able to survive this. Number one is that he grew up in the D.C. area, and everyone knows him here, and he's sort of the party establishment. And so you're more liberal to moderate Republicans who might typically cut bait and cave to a liberal Democratic smear like this. They didn't, because they knew him personally, and they knew it wasn't true. And, if he'd been from a different part of the country, I'm not sure it would have happened that way. And the other reason I think he was able to survive it is the guy's basically never done anything wrong in his entire life. I mean, he's the most squeaky clean guy possible, which is why the only way they were able to accuse him of things was to make them up. Anyone else with a normal life, with normal, transgressions in their younger years and that kind of thing, would have been sunk by this with this level of scrutiny, because things would have come out that were real. It was just the fact that everyone in Washington knew him, and the fact that he was, the squeakiest, squeaky clean guy ever, that the stuff they were able to come up with was obviously made up. That's the only reason he survived this. And frankly, I got to wonder who's going to be willing to take a nomination to the Supreme Court after this. I think this is going to really shrink the pool of people who are willing to subject themselves to this kind of a treatment.
Phil Kerpen joining us on KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. He's from American Commitment. I go back to this idea of the smear job on Kavanaugh, and you're right, Phil. Who is going to want to put themselves through this? And just the tone and tenor. I'd like to switch gears a little on this. The economy is roaring, but energy prices are going up, particularly gasoline. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting. We've got we had more good economic news come out on Friday. The unemployment rate is down to 3.7. It's lowest in 50 years. And markets went down. We had a bad day in financial markets. And I think we're getting to the point now, which is kind of a dangerous point in the economic cycle, where sort of the good news can become bad news, in that people are starting to have inflation fears, both because there's a lot of upward pressure on wages for the first time in a long time, and that's great if you're a worker. And you're finally getting paid more. It's not so great if you're a business and you're trying to make ends meet, because you got to pay more for all of your labor costs. That means you're going to have to charge more on the other end. It means price level will tend to rise. And we're also seeing inputs rise in prices, especially energy, as you pointed out, is now creeping back up. A lot of the country's back over $3 a gallon now for gasoline, or right around there anyway. And so if prices are starting to rise, then the Federal Reserve may be more aggressive in raising interest rates to prevent a fear of inflation sort of picking up speed. And they've already done a few rate increases, and they're planning some for next year. But if they see inflationary pressures emerge, they'll move more aggressively and more rapidly, and then that could threaten to derail the great high growth economy that we've got right now and slow it down, sort of tamp the brakes on it, and we could sort of go back into kind of a moderate to low growth mode as a consequence of that. And so there's always this fear when the economy is doing really, really well, that there could be inflationary pressures. And, I think the experience we had in the 90s, where we had some very high growth years with very low inflation, shows that it doesn't always have to be the case. But we do know that that's the way the Federal Reserve sort of looks at things, and therefore there's a real risk that they're going to perceive, rising wages as being an inflationary pressure. And it doesn't help that we're seeing some higher input prices, particularly in energy. And I do worry that the Fed could be more aggressive, and that could derail this economic recovery or slow it down.
Phil Kerpen, American Commitment, your website if people want more information, sir?
AmericanCommitment.org.
Thank you, brother.
All right, have a good one.
All right, Phil Kerpen. All right, let's go to Joe Bell, our great friend. He and his beautiful wife, Tammy, have been visiting Pittsburgh, her native land, and they're at the Pittsburgh airport getting ready to come home. And I've been enjoying it's old home week for me because I get to see all the sights. I used to live in Pittsburgh. Joe, how are you?
We are doing great, Kevin. You got Tammy with me, and there you go.
Good morning.
Good morning. So another trip to Pittsburgh for people that have never been there. A lot of Steelers fans here. What was it like once again?
Oh, it was great. Got to see a lot of family. Got to see a lot of places I used to hang out with when I was a kid. It was awesome.
Joe, what about you?
Pamati Brothers for me, man. It was all about that Pamati sandwich.
Yes, Pamati Brothers is great. The Pittsburgher, the number 2 seller or whatever. And let's see, Cranberry Township.
We need one in Idaho.
You're right about that.
No, Kevin, it's always great to be on this side of the, that continental divide, but it's always good to go home. Idaho's a great place, and love it, miss it.
Well, it's always great to hear reports east of the Great River, and we don't want to lose you two. So safe travels. Anything else you'd like to say to folks back home? And again, you guys are Canyon County, you're Nampa, and you're going to Pittsburgh. How does it compare?
There is really no comparison. Home is where the heart is, and our home is certainly in Idaho, and our heart's in Idaho. But Pittsburgh's a great city built on history and industry, and it's making a great comeback, Kevin. Next time you're here, just go check out and see what they're doing.
Indeed. Tammy, what about you?
I think I have two hearts because my heart's also here in Pittsburgh. So, yeah, but Idaho is home.
Well, you guys have a safe trip. We so appreciate the updates on Facebook, and thank you for thinking of us this morning.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. See you, man.
All right. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Tammy. Take care. Safe travels. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Now, there you go, R&R. We've got a report from Washington, we've got a report from Pittsburgh, and we've got a report from you.
Let not your heart be troubled, Kay Millie, monarch of the mercantile. You are absolutely, here's one important Espani word for you. Maestro means a teacher.
Wow.
Again, you're my favorite teacher right now. I don't want to make you. Okay, so here's how I got to lay down in priority. The most dangerous times right now are until we get back to daylight. Saving time has dropped off, so after Halloween. So in the Oregon Republic, which is evil, at least they have 24-hour a day school zone, 24-hour a day, and they will ticket maximum 20 miles an hour, 24 hours a day. Now, in Idaho, they're still idiots, and they're still trying to keep up. So please, humans, it should be maximum when it's dry and light, 24. 18 miles an hour. Now, next, I thought I'd found a comrade, and I'm just going to be laughing. I had somebody tell me there was a moment of hope because eggnog was on the shelves. And so I trust to go to the only... Talk about a monopoly, Albertsons in Gem County. Don't buy groceries, in my professional opinion. There's no eggnog. Who manages and who used to manage the store in Gem County? The only place to buy food. So you got to go to Ridley's, and I'm going to lay down some smack. Never on Ridley's. You go to Middleton and buy your groceries, please, from Ridley's. And next, if you're going to buy tires or get car care, Star Car Care. As my friend Kay Millie says, you haven't lived until you've been to the Merc. Now, lastly, there is eggnog, but there isn't any in Gem County because Albertsons is the monopoly. Next, most important thing is, Kevin Miller, you are an authentic human being, and you're right. You can tell a human's soul by their voice, and I'm going to give you a word. It's called Long Valley. That's where the Littles have their cattle and there is the most amazing cattle auction in Jim County today you'll ever get to see. The world's renowned auctioneer in the entire world is in Jim County as I speak. And if you're allowed to come in the course and you want to buy some cattle, the best burger in the whole world is being served in Jim County today, and the greatest world auctioneer is also here. And the Liptolds will definitely have some stock. So if you look at the sign that says Little, it says Little for Idaho. The governor right now happens to be who it is, and I guarantee you it's going to be Little. Lastly, I'm fairly certain that Eric Trump is going to be president of the United States in the future. Peace out, my friend.
R&R, thank you for the predictions. Kevin Miller in the morning here, KIDO Talk Radio. Phone numbers 580-5436, 580-KIDO. We always appreciate your phone calls. Getting back to, and we're going to bring this up, and we want to thank Phil Kerpen for this. But last night, the president swearing in Justice Kavanaugh, and the president really showing what a class act he is. Now, he'll never get the credit for this, but I want you to listen to this one more time.
I would like to begin tonight's proceeding differently than perhaps any other event of such magnitude. On behalf of our nation, I want to apologize to Brett and the entire Kavanaugh family for the terrible pain and suffering you have been forced to endure. Those who step forward to serve our country deserve a fair and dignified evaluation, not a campaign of political and personal destruction based on lies and deception.
And there we have it. Now people are attacking the Republicans for not being gracious. You heard Phil Kerpen. He knows Brett Kavanaugh. They lied about him. They lied about everything else. And now justice has prevailed. But I thought the president doing a great job last night apologizing to Brett Kavanaugh. Other people did not feel the same way. We'll talk about it next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. One of my favorite phrases is act like you've been there before. It's never easy losing. It's always good to be a gracious loser. You know, our parents have told us that for years and years and years, and yet still you have people with their, I don't know, it's almost like they've been sucking on a lemon because they're so angry, they're so mad that Justice Kavanaugh is in. And, you know, you take a look at some of these guys, and they're paid to be in Washington, D.C. They're paid to be, controversial, and they're paid to be, relatively classless when it comes to Judge Kavanaugh, when it comes to losing. We took 8 years of Obama, and the words that continue to haunt the libs, continue to haunt the Democrats, is elections have consequences. We'll expand on that in a minute. First, traffic and weather together, 107.5 FM.
Missouri Gabbard.
And I'm Kevin Miller. Let's take a listen to good old Smokin' Joe.
The Supreme Court for life to figure out a way to extend an olive branch? Of course there was.
That's right. Let's have an olive branch. After we've smeared a guy, lied about a guy, and done everything to derail the guy and discredit him, sure. Let's make sure that we, say we're sorry. Nothing personal. You've just had your life threatened. You've had everything else. Donald Trump was right when he was talking about the nation owes Brett Kavanaugh an apology.
Let us pray we are successful in this task, and let us pray that all of America's children will grow up in a country that is fair and just and safe and strong and free. And let us ask God to bless Justice Kavanaugh and his family as they embark on this incredible journey together. I now invite Justice Brett Kavanaugh to come forward and to take the judicial oath. Thank you very much.
And that was last night at the White House. Kevin Miller, much more coming up. We're going to hear from David. We're going to hear from Max. We're going to hear from you. And the latest concerning Brett Kavanaugh and his move to the Supreme Court. And your calls. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Doug.
Good morning, Kevin.
Kevin Miller in the morning here, KIDO Talk Radio. Our time is 6:35. Coming up on deck, we've got two of our heavy hitters. We've got David in Nampa and Max in Garden City. We do want to hear from them. But first, we're waiting for Tanya J. Powers to join us from Fox News Radio. We'll give her a couple more minutes, and then we'll take your calls. By the way, last night on the Big Fox, if you missed it, Tucker Carlson was going toe-to-toe with a young lady, and they were debating something called toxic masculinity versus toxic femininity. Let's take a listen.
About violence against
Maybe
women,
I'll get right on that.
Talking about a pop star. Please do.
Look, everybody's against violence against women. Let's be clear about that. I want to know if there's such a thing in the academic.
Is about.
Okay, that's your definition. Let me ask you, what is the definition of toxic femininity?
I don't think there is a definition of toxic femininity.
There are a ton of women. Oh, there isn't. Oh, there's not. So there are a lot of women in prison for shooting. Well, I have no idea. Actually, I'll be honest with you. I don't think that inherent qualities are ever toxic. I don't think there's such a thing as toxic homosexuality or toxic masculinity or toxic femininity. I think the whole idea is insane. People act in a way that's bad.
But you are not understanding what the
bad.
definition is, and you're completely
I understand precisely what it is.
Two different points. No, you're not.
Well, then you tell me,
toxic masculinity is not inherent, and not all men are violent and bad. Breaking news, Tucker. Not all men are violent and bad.
That's
and what's so
not actually news to me as a man.
What John Mayer said. What's so controversial about that? He's saying don't feel entitled to women. And we are talking, this is coming on the heels of a really intense time.
Hold on, wait, slow down. Can I ask you a serious question? Okay.
Please do.
It is an intense time, but I think all of us as adults have an obligation to think as clearly as we can.
That's why you shouldn't define
it has
toxic
been a commonplace.
Incorrectly.
There's no definition of it, as you know. It's a bunch of ludicrous low IQ academics making up as they go along.
That's not correct.
And but it is true. But let me ask you very quickly, why not just say abuse is bad? Toxic masculinity is a quality that is inherent in men. You're attacking an inherent quality.
But
you know that perfectly well, which is why you'll not concede that there's such a thing as toxic femininity.
That's what we love about Tucker Carlson and being associated with Fox News. Toxic masculinity, but there's no such thing as toxic femininity. More coming up. Remember, Max in Garden City, David in Nampa. You've been holding on. You've been very patient. We're going to get to you in 2 seconds. Joining us now, Tanya J. Powers from Fox News Radio. Always good to have her on. Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
Good to have you with us here on KIDO Talk Radio. So we take a look at some of the big news of the day. The last day to register to vote in some of the big states, of course. It's all about the midterms. And as you know, it's always about something. And unlike football, there's just no off season. There's no recruiting. When it comes to politics, it's the never-ending season.
I don't know. Maybe the recruiting's gone on before now, and it's now time to see if that works for some candidates in some states. You have, as you mentioned, the last day to register in several states. Several states is today. You have, oh my goodness, Arizona, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Indiana, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Michigan, New Mexico, Ohio, Tennessee, Texas, and Pennsylvania. I think those are the only ones that have, or all the ones rather, that have registration by today.
Sure.
There are some other ones who have them kind of sprinkled in between now and the end of the month. I know here in New York, ours is on Friday. We got to be registered to vote by Friday, or on Friday is the deadline, rather. So that's kind of, where that is for most of America is, like I said, today. A lot of them, and I didn't realize there were this many states. There's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like not even, maybe a dozen or so who have voting, like you can register on voting day. I think your state is one of those.
Wow. I don't know about that, little buddy.
You don't know about that?
They always talk about there's no voter ID. All I know is when I go to vote in beautiful Star, Idaho, they ask for my ID.
Interesting. Is your state a voter ID state?
I don't know. All I know is they sit there and ask for my ID. I guess they just don't trust me. I guess I don't look trustworthy. That's why I'm on the radio. So
I don't know.
Glad I could make you laugh there. That's the truth.
I don't know.
I feel kind of bullied right now.
Well, I don't know why.
Everybody's a victim. I'm just joining the club.
Oh my goodness.
Only 28 more days till the midterms. What are you going to be doing?
Yeah, it's going to be here pretty quickly, actually. And I can't wait to go out and do some coverage of this because this is it's going to be one of those years people actually are paying attention to midterms.
Well, and you are our political expert.
See, I give you these opportunities, and you pick right up on them. This is why we work well together, Kevin.
It's how I show my affection.
It is indeed.
Tanya J. Powers, we appreciate you. One day we shall meet east of the Great River, or, the PBR is coming in next week.
Well, we could have met when you were in New York, I believe, but, since you...
Well, Washington,
that's right.
Yeah.
But it's just a train right away, man. It's just like down the road.
I don't know.
Maybe that's not down the road.
It's not a stagecoach. I don't trust it.
Well done.
Tanya J. Powers, thank you, ma'am. You have a great day.
Sure. Thank you.
What a nice young lady. We continue on. Okay, let's roll. David in Nampa, good morning. You're on KIDO Talk Radio. Thank you for your patience, David.
Thank you. Hey, before I get to my main point, can I give 30 seconds on toxic femininity?
Why not?
A talk show was ending, and a man called up and said, yeah, women, they're better. You don't see women torturers, serial killers. And the music started to go up, and the host said, there are a lot of men murderers, torturers, rapists. And for everyone, there was a woman who loved him. And the music started to get higher, and the caller said, you know what? You're absolutely right. It's Hillary Clinton hiring these scumbag private investigators to find out dirt on the women her husband attacked. It's women who see men as powerful, and because men have been so wussified that they look at, jerks, and they don't see them as moral people. Why do you think the Silence of the Lambs character was a sex object? Because he was powerful. Women are thinking power, not in moral terms. But anyway, that's toxic femininity. Obviously not all women, but let's move on. We need some guy on the internet. I was visiting somebody, but he fell off and we couldn't get him back on. His name was Lee. Said the Democrats need a now you can't leave moment. And I'll explain what that is in a minute. This fraud woman who
Did you say fraud woman?
I think I did. Well, maybe it was a Freudian slip, and maybe I meant it. Anyway, she said, I will tell you she was coached, and I'll tell you one of her coaches, and you need to cheat off smart people's paper, only skimmed, did not read a biography of one of Kavanaugh's friends because he had him working at Safeway. You should have read, not skimmed, because that Safeway wasn't built until 1986. Okay, so here we go again. Let's do this again. Sarah Palin banned books that wouldn't be published for 4 years. Ann Coulter plagiarized things that wouldn't be written for 3 years. Clarence Thomas sexually harassed a woman that he didn't meet for another 6 months. And, of course, Donald Trump groped a woman on an airplane that the airline stopped using. So, he's a pig in the pit, shall fall therein. Remember that? So now we have Christine Fraud is having a conversation in a Safeway that won't be built for 4 years. And here's what a now used guys can't leave, or now used can't leave. In the movie A Bronx Tale, there's 4 bikers, and they're in a bar. But it's owned by the wise guys, the mob,
Yeah.
And they're being bikers. And a guy walks over and tells them it's time to leave. And they won't. He walks over and locks the door, comes back and says, you were told to leave. Now you can't leave. And for the next 3 or 4 minutes, they just get the snot beat out of them. Now, not literally. Okay, we're not hashtag punch a Nazi. We're not hashtag hunt Republicans. But that fraud woman needs to be brought up on charges. I'm sorry. And this other idiot who, I don't know if she actually filed a police report that, Brett Kavanaugh was part of 10 gang rape parties. Yeah.
That she kept going back to.
And then took a drink. Again, you are as stupid as the guy who doesn't understand the hot blonde who is totally into him is really Bugs Bunny in a wig and a dress. That's how dumb you are. I mean, these people, they need to be prosecuted. And we believe survivors, really? What about Kathleen Willey? The dead cat left on her front doorstep. What about Juanita Broderick, who had 2 outcry witnesses? But the way the rape laws were structured back then. So, yeah, we need to start, when Harry Reid lied, but because he did it in the only place in the universe where he couldn't get sued, Republicans should have had every Democrat under siege. And by the way, speaking of with waving around, letters, affidavits, demanding you do something about Harry Reid, or Maxine Waters, who told people to break the law. Remember when she said, when you see one of these, cabinet members at a restaurant, at a gasoline station, at a department store, you get a crowd going. That is a violation of California law.
Indeed.
Right?
David, I got to run, but thank you. All right. You're welcome, Kevin. Max in Garden City, thanks for your patience. You're on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Max.
Well, very good morning to you and to everybody.
Thank you for your patience, young man.
And thank you for your show. I am so proud that our president stood up on behalf of all Americans, including snowflake, whiny Democrats and lying women. Not all women. I'm talking the ones who testified against him. Our president stood up and he apologized on behalf of the American people to Brett Kavanaugh and to his family. This was worse than a travesty of justice because the Democrats so far have gotten away with it. They haven't succeeded, but they've gotten away with it. The previous caller is right on the money. This liar needs to be brought up on charges or committed to mental treatment. When you watch the lady's body language testifying on TV, it's pretty doggone clear that something has happened or is happening in that head of hers. Well, since when has this country taken one mental case or one liar and simply taken their word and gone after anybody? This is a new low.
Well, when it fits somebody's political agenda.
Well, but it's even worse. The Democratic National Committee, in my learned opinion, poses the greatest single threat to this nation, more so than Al-Qaeda, more than Al-Hafaz, more than any radical group or foreign power. We need to look within because the communists are at the gate. I lived with them for 15 years.
I'm trying to figure out which ones, the Russians or the Chinese?
Oh, both. They've embraced an ideal that they call loosely communism. What it really means is they want the power. They want the power over you. Every man, woman, and child out there listening.
Isn't it sad, though, that we see our great nation and our greatest generation that gave us the baby boomers, the Gen Xers, and now these millennials that are so malleable? Not all millennials. I think it's the toughest time to be a conservative, a social conservative in our country's history, but people that are so swayed by, what people say that they don't look at things critically. One of the marvelous things I love to do with Mrs. Miller is I will talk back at the television. And, just because somebody says something, we're taught inherently, at least we were, to challenge these things. And yet you have people saying, all these things about the Brett Kavanaugh or men and toxic masculinity, whatever the heck that is. And you think to yourself, the Chinese and the Russians have to be laughing at us because they're engaged in something called PSYOPs, psychological operations, and we're too stupid to figure out what they're doing to us.
Stupid is the word. We've become a soundbite generation. We don't read. We don't listen. I'll say, what do you think about the following situation? They'll say, well, I read in the Washington Post. What they mean by I read is I saw the headline. I read the caption under the picture. Boom, I read the Washington Post. I heard a soundbite on CBS. I listened to the Kavanaugh speech. Good Lord, people. Read, listen, talk to each. You can't talk politics to anybody because if they're snowflakes, they come unglued immediately. And if they're Republicans or conservatives, they just don't want to talk about it.
Sure.
Well, people, you can just don't want to talk about it all the way into socialism. We can be like Canada. We can be like Britain. We can be like Australia. Do you want the country keeping tabs every time you go to the bathroom, every time you flush your toilet, every time you drink? It's coming for many people in the world. It's here. And if you don't stand up and rise in the voting booth, go to the voting booth and make them pay for what they've done to us and Kavanaugh. Because what they did to Kavanaugh, they did by proxy to every man, every boy in this country. It's time to strike back on their behalf. Go to the booth, flip your lever, punch your hole, do whatever you do to vote, and let's take these punks down.
Max, thank you for the call.
Hey, thank you, sir.
580-5436, 580-KIDO. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio.
Police say the Ridge, New York driver's ed teacher drove away without his students. But as it turns out, that was a good thing because cops say moments later he rear-ended another car. This after the 4 students asked him to stop at a McDonald's and bailed out of the car, dialing 911 to tell police that their driver's ed instructor was drunk. The teacher, 58-year-old Russell Cohn, charged with drunk driving. Gary Baumgarten, Fox News.
All right, Gary, thank you very much. You're listening to 107.5 FM, 580 AM. KIDO Talk Radio with Kevin Miller in the morning, then Glenn Beck. That's the right way to start your morning. Phone numbers 580. How do you come back from that story? I mean, you have a driver's ed teacher that is drinking while driving, allegedly, and the students are smarter than the teacher, right? More on that in a minute. First, traffic and weather together. Let's get you to work safely and on time.
Pro.
You know, it's so important to sit back and hold all of ourselves accountable. You know, we laugh a little bit about this driver's ed teacher that was drunk and smashed into someone. But whether it's the destruction of personal property or it's people getting hurt, there's an inherent responsibility that all of us have when we're going to work, when we're going home, when we're driving our kids, whether it's to soccer practice, football practice, or to band or gymnastics or what have you, right? Case in point, what happened in New York, so many people have died that shouldn't have because of somebody's ignorance, in my opinion. We'll talk a little bit about that next. Responsibility. As we're waking up on the right side. Good morning, Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.